You were told the Bible is perfect, flawless, without contradiction. But what if the most confusing parts are the most honest ones? Because hidden inside its pages are stories that clash, timelines that don't match, commands that reverse themselves. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. These contradictions aren't accidents. They're clues. Clues about how belief was formed, how power was preserved, and how humans tried to understand chaos with certainty. Stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you won't just see the Bible differently, you'll see belief itself differently. One creation, or two. Let's start at the beginning. Literally. Genesis opens with confidence, not hesitation. The tone is calm, controlled, almost architectural. There is light separated from darkness, sky from sea, land from water. Everything has its place. Everything moves in sequence. 6 days, no confusion, no resistance. Humans appear at the end, male and female together, as if they were always meant to arrive as a pair. The message is simple and powerful. The universe is ordered, purposeful, designed. You are part of a system that already makes sense. Then you turn the page, and something feels off. The rhythm changes, the certainty softens, the story narrows its focus. This time, man appears first, alone. The world is not fully formed yet. Animals come after him, almost as companions in an experiment that does not work. Only then does woman appear, not from the dust, but from the man himself. Same book, same opening, two stories that refuse to line up. If you were taught that the Bible is a single, seamless account, this moment can feel like a crack in the foundation. But here is the part most sermons rush past. These stories were never trying to answer the same question. The first creation story answers a cosmic fear. Is the world chaos or order? Are we random or intentional? It reassures a people who needed stability. It says the universe is not hostile. It is structured, governed, predictable. The second story answers a human fear. Why does loneliness hurt? Why do we long for connection? Why does power come with responsibility and consequence? This is not about stars and oceans. It is about intimacy, vulnerability, dependence. Different communities, different moments in history, different anxieties pressed into story form. One story says, order exists. The other whispers something quieter but deeper. You are not meant to be alone. And that tension is not a mistake. It is the point. Belief does not begin with perfect logic. It begins where certainty fails to explain human experience. From the very first pages, the Bible is already holding two truths at once: structure and fragility, power and need. And if contradiction is present at the moment of creation, then it is not an error that appears later. It is the blueprint. Does God change or never change? You have heard it said so many times it feels unquestionable. God is unchanging, perfect, eternal, the same yesterday, today, and forever. This idea offers comfort. If God never changes, then reality itself feels stable. The rules are fixed. The ground does not move beneath your feet. But then you read the stories themselves. God regrets creating humanity and decides to erase nearly all of it in a flood. That is not distance or detachment. That is disappointment. Later, God regrets choosing a king, as if the decision itself was a mistake. Again and again, prayers seem to alter outcomes. Destruction is delayed. Mercy appears. Punishment intensifies. Hearts are softened. Others are hardened. This does not sound like an unchanging force. It sounds like reaction. So which version are you supposed to believe? The perfect and immovable God, or the God who responds, adjusts, and even regrets? Here is the uncomfortable answer most people never hear. The Bible is not describing one fixed idea of God. It is documenting how the idea of God evolved. Early writers experienced the divine through emotion and crisis. Their God looked human because their world felt unpredictable. Crops failed, enemies invaded, children died. A distant and unresponsive deity would have felt cruel. So God was portrayed as close, reactive, sometimes angry, sometimes compassionate, a reflection of the chaos they were trying to survive. Later generations needed something different. societies grew larger, power structures became fragile, authority needed reinforcement. A God who could change his mind became dangerous. If God reacts, then leaders can be questioned. If God feels regret, then certainty collapses. So God was reshaped into perfection, above emotion, above doubt, beyond appeal. Not because the truth was discovered, but because control was required. The contradiction is not theological, it is psychological. It shows the moment belief stopped being about explaining suffering and started being about managing people. Fear needed a God who felt. Order needed a God who could not be moved. Once you see this shift, everything else starts to feel different. The laws, the punishments, the absolute claims, they no longer sound like eternal truths handed down from the sky. They sound like human answers to an unstable world. And that realization quietly prepares you for what comes next. Love your enemies or destroy them. Now think about this for a moment. Some of the most quoted lines in human history come from the same book that also contains its darkest commands. Love your enemies, turn the other cheek, bless those who curse you. These words feel radical even today. They pull against instinct. They ask you to respond to harm with restraint and to hatred with compassion. They sound like moral evolution at its highest point. And then you keep reading. Entire cities are wiped out. Not just soldiers, but men, women, and children. The destruction is not accidental, it is commanded. At times, it is even celebrated as obedience. The language is not apologetic, it is confident, certain, righteous. Same God, completely opposite instructions. So what changed? The answer is not mystery, it is context. The earliest scriptures were written in survival mode. Small tribes surrounded by constant threat. Land meant life, loss meant extinction. In that world, mercy could look like weakness, and hesitation could mean death. Violence was not seen as cruelty, it was seen as necessity. Survival demanded a moral framework that justified force, because without it, the group would not last another generation. Later teachings emerge in a different environment. Larger populations, more stable societies, enemies living next door instead of beyond the horizon. Violence now threatens internal collapse more than external danger. So morality shifts. Control no longer comes from the sword. It comes from behavior, from restraint, from internalized rules that keep people predictable and manageable. Love your enemies is not just compassion, it is social technology. The contradiction is not hypocrisy, it is adaptation. Morality did not descend fully formed from heaven. It evolved under pressure, shaped by fear, scarcity, and power. That realization is unsettling, because it removes the illusion of permanence. If moral commands can reverse themselves based on circumstance, then they are not absolute in the way we were taught. And that raises a disturbing question you cannot easily escape. If morality can change when conditions change, then what else in belief is flexible? And who decides when it shifts again? Salvation by faith or by works? This one has divided churches, families, and entire lifetimes. You are told you are saved by faith alone, not by deeds, not by effort, not by how well you behave. Just believe, and it is enough. The promise is comforting. It removes pressure. It tells you that acceptance is not earned but given. Then another voice enters the text and disrupts everything. Faith without works is dead. Belief that produces no action is empty. Words without movement are meaningless. Suddenly salvation sounds conditional again, measured, demanding. So which one saves you, belief or behavior? What is really happening here is quieter and more human than doctrine admits. Different authors were trying to solve different crises. One group feared legalism, a world where people followed rules perfectly while their hearts grew cold, where obedience replaced compassion, where moral performance became a way to feel superior. Faith alone was a rebellion against that. It said you cannot earn your way into worth. You cannot dominate others by claiming moral perfection. The other group feared something just as dangerous: emptiness, belief without responsibility, a faith that excused cruelty, laziness, or indifference because forgiveness was guaranteed. Works mattered because they anchored belief in reality. they forced faith to show itself through action. Both perspectives were right, and they contradicted each other completely. Because belief alone tends to create arrogance. It whispers that intention matters more than impact, that you are justified even when you harm others. But works alone create shame. They turn life into a scoreboard where you are never doing enough, never measuring up, never safe. The Bible does not choose a side. It leaves the tension unresolved, not because the answer was hidden, but because the tension itself is the lesson. Human beings swing between pride and guilt, between entitlement and self-punishment. The text reflects that struggle instead of solving it. And whether you realize it or not, that unresolved contradiction still shapes how you see yourself, how you judge others, how you decide what makes a life worthy. But to understand why truth itself becomes unstable, we need to go even deeper. Eyewitness, or hearsay? The Gospels claim to tell the story of Jesus, his life, his death, his resurrection. They are treated as eyewitness testimony, read as if 4 cameras were pointed at the same event from different angles. But when you slow down and compare them closely, something unsettling appears. Who arrives at the tomb? 1 woman, 2 women, or several? Is the stone already moved when they arrive, or does it roll away dramatically in front of them? Does Jesus speak immediately, offering reassurance, or does he say nothing at all? Each account feels confident on its own. Together, they refuse to align. These are not small cosmetic differences. They are structural fractures. If these were courtroom statements, the contradictions would matter. But they were never meant to function that way. Here is the key insight most people never hear. Human memory does not record events like a camera. It reshapes them around meaning. In psychology, memory is reconstructed, not replayed. People remember what an event meant to them, not what objectively happened in perfect sequence. The gospel writers were not journalists. They were storytellers with a purpose. Each one was speaking to a different audience, with different fears and doubts. Some communities needed reassurance that death had been conquered. Others needed silence and awe. Some needed proof. Others needed mystery. So the story bends to meet the need. That does not make the accounts useless. It makes them revealing. The Gospels are not court transcripts. They are belief documents. Each version of the resurrection is shaped to produce a specific emotional response. Hope, reverence, urgency, faith. Truth, in this context, was not about accuracy. It was about impact, about what the story did to the listener. And once you accept that, something quietly collapses. The idea of certainty begins to feel fragile. Because if the most important moment in the story is remembered differently by those closest to it, then belief is not built on perfect recollection. It is built on meaning. And meaning, by its nature, is never as solid as we were taught to believe. Free will or predestination. This is the paradox that has kept theologians, philosophers, and ordinary people awake at night. On one page, you are told to choose, repent, decide. Your life is framed as a series of meaningful actions. Your choices matter. Responsibility is unavoidable. Then you turn the page and hear something completely different. Everything is ordained. Your fate is sealed. God already knows the end from the beginning. Nothing surprises him. Nothing escapes the plan. So which is it? Are you free or are you scripted? The contradiction exists because humans need both ideas to survive psychologically. Responsibility gives life meaning. If your choices matter, then your pain and effort are not wasted. Guilt and pride make sense. Growth becomes possible. Without free will, existence starts to feel hollow, like a role you never agreed to play. But destiny serves a different need. It provides safety. When suffering feels unbearable or random, the idea that everything is part of a plan becomes a shield. If your future is known, then chaos is an illusion. Loss feels less cruel. Fear becomes manageable. Free will feeds dignity. Predestination feeds comfort. The Bible does not resolve this tension because resolving it would cost too much. Choose only free will and God loses control. Choose only destiny and humans lose accountability. So the text holds both ideas at once, even though they cannot logically coexist. This is the moment where belief reveals its true function. It is not designed to be internally consistent. It is designed to stabilize the human mind under pressure. Logic bends so that meaning can survive. And once you see that, a darker realization starts to form. If contradiction is allowed here, at the very core of agency and fate, then it can be allowed anywhere. Which brings us to the most dangerous contradiction of all. Question everything except this. Throughout the Bible, people argue with God. They challenge him, they plead, they wrestle. Abraham negotiates. Job demands answers. Prophets question justice itself. Doubt is not hidden in the text. It is openly displayed, sometimes even rewarded. Early belief allowed tension because faith was still personal, raw, unsettled. But then something begins to change, slowly and almost invisibly. Questioning starts to feel dangerous. Doubt is no longer a sign of engagement but a mark of rebellion. Obedience becomes the highest virtue. Silence replaces struggle. The same tradition that once preserved argument now begins to suppress it. Why does this shift happen? Because once a belief system grows large enough, questions stop being harmless. They threaten structure. They weaken hierarchy. They invite interpretation where uniformity is needed. A community can survive debate. An institution cannot. So contradiction is no longer something to wrestle with. It becomes something to deny. Authority steps in where uncertainty once lived. Not because truth was finally discovered, but because order became more important than understanding. This is the real revelation hiding in plain sight. The Bible is not a single voice speaking from the sky. It is a long conversation stretching across centuries. Different authors, different fears, different goals. Some voices invite you to argue, others demand submission. And conversations are messy. They contradict themselves. They change tone. They reflect whoever is speaking at the time. The danger begins when a conversation is frozen and declared finished. When one voice is elevated and the rest are silenced. At that moment, belief stops being a search and becomes a rule book. And that is why this contradiction matters more than all the others. Because the moment questioning is forbidden, growth ends. Not just for belief, but for the human mind itself. So, what do we do with all this? We do not throw the Bible away in anger, and we do not worship it blindly out of fear. We read it honestly, with attention, with courage, with the same curiosity that created it in the first place. Its contradictions are not proof of failure. They are proof of humanity, trying to survive, trying to explain suffering, trying to build meaning in an uncertain world. Fear and hope, control and compassion, all pulling in different directions, all leaving their fingerprints on the text. The real danger is not that contradictions exist. The danger is pretending they do not. Because the moment belief stops allowing questions, it stops growing. And when people stop thinking, authority quietly takes over. Maybe the Bible's biggest contradiction is not hidden in its verses at all. Maybe it lives in how we were taught to read it, as answers instead of a struggle. If this made you uncomfortable, that is a sign something important is happening. If it made you curious, even better. Truth does not fear examination, only certainty does. If you value truth over comfort, stay curious, subscribe, and never stop questioning.